In the heart of Rome, an emperor's mad dream became reality. 80,000 people screamed amid the stench of blood, but no one knew that those who built this massive arena would never see it completed. The fall of Nero and the rise of Vespasian AD 68. Emperor Nero committed suicide, leaving Rome in flames. His remaining golden palace, the Domus Aurea, was a symbol of the people's hatred. 120 hectares of land used solely for one man's pleasure and luxury. Artificial lakes, golden statues, rotating dining halls. While the Roman people starved, Nero lived in opulence. 4 emperors seized the throne through violence within a single year. Civil war tore Rome apart. Finally, Vespasian won. From an ordinary military family, a harsh, pragmatic general, his first task was to win the people's trust. And for that, he needed to destroy Nero's symbols. AD 72, Vespasian made a historic decision. He would fill in the lake portion of the Domus Aurea and erect the largest amphitheater Rome had ever seen. But this wasn't just a building. This was a message. Nero stole what belonged to the people. I am giving it back to you. However, the truth wasn't that pure. Vespasian had destroyed Jerusalem in AD 70. The Jewish temple was razed, tons of gold and silver brought to Rome as spoils. And now, with this plunder, he would build a giant circus to control the people. Bread and circuses, the formula written in slaves' blood. When the first shovel struck ground, when the first shovel struck the earth, no one could comprehend its scale. Nero's artificial lake was drained. Thousands of tons of mud and water were pumped into the Tiber River. Foundation excavation began. 6 meters deep, an elliptical pit, 189 meters long, 156 meters wide. Rome's most talented engineers planned the project. But who would do it? Who would carry tons of stone, work for months under the sun, put their lives on the line? The answer was simple. Slaves. When Vespasian's son Titus besieged Jerusalem in AD 70, he completely destroyed the city. According to the historian Josephus's records, 1.1 million Jews were killed, 97,000 taken prisoner. Most of these prisoners were taken to Rome. Some were sent to gladiator schools, some died in mines, and some were driven to the Colosseum construction site. Most of the Jewish slaves were skilled stonemasons who had worked on the construction of the Jerusalem temple. The hands that raised their own sacred sanctuary would now build Rome's monument to glory. The irony was one of history's cruelest tricks. The journey of the stones. Every structure's soul lies in its material. The chosen material for the Colosseum was travertine stone. This white limestone quarried from quarries near Tivoli was both durable and impressive. But transporting it from quarries 30 kilometers away to Rome deserved its own epic tale. Each travertine block weighed approximately 300 kilograms. A total of 100,000 cubic meters of stone was used. If you calculate, approximately 300,000 tons of material. This needed to be transported between AD 70 to 80, within 8 years. Slaves set out before dawn, wooden frames on their backs, stone blocks on top. Along the way, dust clouds covered the sky. When the sun was overhead, temperatures reached 40 large degrees. Water breaks were limited. Whip sounds accelerated those who slowed down. Some slaves fell on the road, their feet bloody, their backs broken. Roman overseers gave no order to stop. Leave them, they would say. Let those coming from behind see and learn. Bodies were left to rot by the roadside. Vultures would feast at night. When stones reached Rome, they were transported to the construction site by giant cranes. These pulley systems, called polyspaston, operated by human and animal power. Placing a stone sometimes took hours. One wrong move meant chains breaking, dozens of people being crushed. And in the records, there is no count of slaves who died on the construction site. Only the amount of stone used, the amount of gold spent. People weren't even statistics. Engineering marvel. The invisible systems. What kept the Colosseum standing wasn't just stones. Inside the structure was an invisible skeletal system. 300 tons of iron and bronze clamps connected the travertine blocks to each other. These metal connections allowed the structure to gain flexibility during earthquakes. Roman engineers had even laid the foundations of seismic resistance. But who cast this iron? Who installed it? Blacksmith slaves. People working day and night before the fire, with burn marks on their hands. One wrong move meant molten metal splashing on their faces. There was no medical help. Those who got infections would die in fever. The structure's outer facade was designed in 3 different architectural orders. First floor, Doric order, simple, powerful. Second floor, Ionic order, more elegant. Third floor, Corinthian order, ornate, showy. The 4th floor was a plain wall, with wooden posts on top to support the velarium. 80 arches on each level, 240 arch openings in total. The symmetry was perfect, but behind each arch was a worker's sweat. The arena floor was built on a wooden platform. Beneath it was an entirely different world. The hypogeum, the underground system. 2 stories deep, a complex network of tunnels. Here gladiators prepared. Wild animals waited in cages. But the most astonishing part was the mechanical systems. 28 elevator shafts opened to the arena floor. Levers, weights, ropes. A lion could burst from the arena floor in seconds. Spectators would be amazed without understanding how. It seemed like magic. But in reality, dozens of slaves underground were pulling winches, lifting weights, breathless, in the darkness. Working in the hypogeum was the harshest punishment. There was no air, no light, only torch smoke and animal waste. The roar of lions echoed through the tunnels. Some slaves went mad from fear. Some hanged themselves with ropes. But construction didn't stop. The velarium, the canopy in the sky. On Rome's hot summer days, 80,000 people sat for hours under the sun. The solution? The velarium, a giant awning system. 160 wooden poles were mounted to the Colosseum's top level. From here, ropes extended to giant awnings made of linen fabric. The awning didn't cover the entire arena, but it left 80% of spectators in shade. The arena floor remained under the sun. Gladiators continued fighting in the heat. The hypogeum, the labyrinth of darkness. The hypogeum beneath the arena floor was the Colosseum's darkest secret. This was an invisible world. While spectators screamed above, gladiators said their final prayers below. Construction of the hypogeum was the riskiest part. Wooden supports were used to prevent soil collapse. However, in rainy weather, soil would soften and tunnels would collapse. In AD 75, a major collapse occurred. 40 slaves were buried under the earth. No rescue operation was conducted. The tunnel was sealed in its collapsed state. Another route was opened. The hypogeum had 32 elevator shafts. Each shaft operated with a counterweight system. Heavy stone blocks were tied to ropes. When slaves released the weights, the lion on the platform would shoot upward. The system was simple but deadly. One mistake meant the platform collapsing, slaves being crushed. Wild animals were kept in special cages. Lions, tigers, bears, elephants. All were starved into madness. They were kept hungry for days before shows. The cages reeked. Animal excrement, blood, rotting meat. Slaves had to clean these cages. Many were attacked by animals in the process. One section of the hypogeum was a water reservoir. It was used for naumachiae, mock naval battles. The arena floor was made waterproof. When water channels opened, the arena would fill with 1.5 meters of water. Small ships were brought in, prisoners placed inside. Then they were ordered to fight to the death. But preparing these shows took days. Pumping water, positioning ships, then draining the water. At every stage, slaves worked. Some would drown, some would be crushed under the ships. No one was counting. The death of Vespasian and Titus's rush, and 79, Vespasian fell ill. At the end of his 9-year reign, the old emperor was joking. "I think I'm becoming a god." According to Roman belief, emperors were deified after death. Vespasian mocked even this, but the Colosseum still wasn't finished. His son Titus took the throne, and he had an obsession completing his father's monument at any cost. Titus doubled the number of ships to accelerate construction. Slaves now worked day and night. Sleep breaks were reduced to 4 hours. Food portions were decreased, because the project had to be finished within a year. AD 79 August, Mount Vesuvius erupted. Pompeii and Herculaneum were destroyed. Thousands of people died under ash. Titus sent aid, but he didn't stop Colosseum construction. The opening ceremony, 100 days of blood. Titus would make the opening the greatest spectacle in history. 100 days of non-stop entertainment. Free bread, free wine, free death. On the first day, 9,000 wild animals were brought to the arena. Lions, elephants, giraffes, hippos, all to be killed. Venatores, animal hunters, attacked the animals with arrows, spears, swords. The crowd applauded at every death. Blood turned the sand red. To mask the smell, lavender and rose petals were scattered. The variety of shows was endless. Bestiari, prisoners fighting against animals. Most were unarmed. They had to face a lion. The outcome was obvious, but sometimes there were surprises. A prisoner might jump on a bull's back and break its neck. The crowd would go wild. The emperor could grant pardon, but mostly he would just order more creative death methods. Gladiator fights were the most popular shows. Murmio vs. Retiarius, Hoplomachus vs. Thriax. Each type had different weapons, different strategies. Fights were deadly, but not always. If a gladiator fought impressively enough, the crowd could request mercy. The emperor would decide with his thumb, up, life, down, die. But the strangest show was naumachiae, mock naval battles. The arena was filled with water. Ships were brought in. Prisoners were loaded inside. Then they were ordered to kill each other. Ships sank. People drowned. Spectators were thrilled as if watching a real naval battle. After 100 days, no one knew how many people had died. The soul of the structure, speaking with stones. Today, if you approach the Colosseum and touch the walls, the travertine stones are cold. But if you know where to look, you see traces. Carved marks on stone surfaces. Greek, Aramaic letters. On some stones, names. Slaves had tried to carve their existence into history, as if to say, I was here. On some stones, bloodstains, absorbed into the stone pores, never removed. Chemical tests confirmed it was human blood. But whose blood? A gladiator's? A slave's? A prisoner's? There's no answer. On the walls of the hypogeum there are scratches, fingernail marks. Someone in the darkness had searched for an escape route. They found none. There was only stone, and stone shows no mercy. Modern archaeologists, while excavating the Colosseum's foundations, found mass graves. Over 200 skeletons buried in disarray. Bone analysis showed heavy workload, inadequate nutrition, repeated trauma. Age range, 1545. Average age of death, 28. These were construction slaves. No monument was erected. No ceremony was held. There was only earth and oblivion. Legacy. Time's unconquered witnesses. The Colosseum has stood for 946 years. Despite earthquakes, fires, looting, stone theft, everything. Half of the structure has disappeared. In the Middle Ages, travertine blocks were removed and transported to St. Peter's Basilica Palazzo Venezia. Bronze clamps were melted down to make cannons. But it didn't completely vanish. Why? Because the foundation was so solid. Because the engineering was brilliantly done. Because each stone was placed with a life. Today, 7 million tourists visit the Colosseum annually. Tour guides talk about Rome's glory, gladiator fights, the empire's power. But how many guides talk about the slaves? How many tourists think about the nameless heroes buried in the soil beneath their feet? The Colosseum is not a victory monument. It's a tombstone. Each travertine block, a life. Each metal clamp, a pain. Each tunnel, a forgotten scream. Rome fell. The empire collapsed. But the stones remained, silently, bearing witness. And perhaps the greatest lesson is this. Structures are permanent, but the owners of the hands that built them are forgotten. Or should they not be forgotten?